call to order the October meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank everybody for being here today. We have a very full agenda, so we're going to get going immediately. Before I do get to the actual items, this Councilmember Scipio has asked that I pull G5, which is the lease for Union Station, and C24, which was some playground equipment, and one of them was Brushy Fork. So without objection, I'll hold those two in committee for a month. With that, we will go to the consent first. Are there any consent items anyone would like pulled?
C5.
We have C5.
C19.
C19. Any others?
C21.
C21. Mr. Taylor, you got any?
No, sir. I'm good to go.
Okay,
Move for approval of the ballot. Oh, you got some. I'm sorry. You probably do. Go ahead.
Is there a motion to approve the ballot?
I move for approval of the ballots.
All right, is there a
Second.
We have a motion to second approve the balance of the consent agenda. All in favor, please vote accordingly. That is approved. We will do the consent items first, starting with C5. If the secretary please read that one.
Item C5, resolution of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, approving a lease agreement and related matter.
Ms. Saunders, this is something we don't do that often. Would you mind refreshing our memories on what we're doing here, then,
Okay.
Mr. McIntosh, ma'am?
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, and members of the City Council.
Good afternoon.
Since about 1984, we have been using a leasing program where we issue low-cost financing and we lease back that equipment to various departments in the city. General fund departments are not charged interest. Proprietary funds are charged 5.5% interest, and then we earn investment income on the proceeds of the debt. So for this situation where we are issuing $18 million or borrowing $18 million from Bank of America, we'll invest that and we'll buy the equipment as we need it over the next 18 to 24 months, and then we charge the departments back 1/5 of that payment every year, and that's budgeted annually through the various funds of the city.
And that's essentially what I wanted, was an overview of how that program works,
Right.
because on the face of it, it's a little hard to follow. But
Right.
so we borrow the money, we lend it back to ourselves,
Right.
we make enough money to cover our borrowing costs with the bank.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
And we do 18 million about every other year.
We've
So-
done between 15 and 25 million. 18 should cover us for the next couple of years based on the budget for 2020 and what we expect in 2021.
Okay.
And this actually refinances the 2016 equipment lease from a variable to a fixed rate as well. So the new lease will be $25 million at 1.61% over 59 months.
And Ms. Adams has.
Yes, Ms. Saunders, and you might not be able to disclose this, but what were some of the restrictions that prevented Wells Fargo from being the lender?
They were mostly legal restrictions that it's not our practice. And Angela might want to speak to some of them. One of them concerned our governmental immunity. The other one was cross default, which we would never default on a debt anyway. But Wells had some restrictions they hadn't in previous transactions requiring, and we weren't willing to agree to those.
Okay.
Essentially, they wanted the city to waive governmental immunity, or at least say it would not allege that as a defense, and that's something that we don't do.
Is this a change in Wells's philosophy?
I'm not sure. It had
We-
not been asked for before, so I'm not sure why they asked for it this time.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
right.
Can we get a motion on this one?
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion second to approve item C5. If you please vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank you very much. The next one is C19. If the secretary please read that one.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to approve a change order with APAC Atlantic Incorporated Thompson Arthur Division for additional construction services on the 2018 bond resurfacing contract.
Can we get a few comments on this? Staff.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the City Council.
Good afternoon.
My name is Damon Duquesne, Assistant City Manager. This item adds the following work to the existing Phase 1 of the resurfacing contract that's primarily funded by the bonds. There's some additional streets in the Southeast Ward that are funded through funds that were allocated for the Southeast Ward. Roseanne Drive, Casa Vista Lane, Morningstar Lane. There's repaving of Wista parking lots. That's being paid for through the Wista Fund, the amount of $268,000, and a raised table pedestrian safety improvement on London Lane, funded out of the 2019 limited obligation bonds at $46,000 approximately.
This is a change order, so there are other streets that were already on it.
Yes, sir. That was the phase one, the priority resurfacing contract.
Yeah.
So we're just adding this work to that.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I had this pulled is because we're spending $832,300.35. Throughout this agenda, I have looked at the consent agenda, and we're spending quite a lot of money. And my concern in spending this money, how many of the MWBEs, minorities, are actually being given jobs? And I'm asking directly to the city manager if you would give, not today, but a report. Because when I ride through the city and I look at the people working on the streets and the sidewalks, I do not see, and I say minorities, I mean I do not see many people looking like me. In fact, I don't hardly see any looking like me. And I feel as taxpayers that we need to have an assurance that we're going to hire capable minority people in this community, and that you must understand that the MWB is not a plaything. It's a real something, and we need to get real with it. And I hope that the mayor hears this also, Mayor, as you talk with the folks about what we ought to be doing that's right by our citizens in this community. And Mr. Chairman, that was my concern. And with that, you want me to move?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Because I didn't have any hold back on this. It's just using this as an example. I move for approval.
Okay, if I can get a second on that from somebody.
Second.
Ms. Garrity, can you add some information to the packet for Monday night?
Yes,
Maybe
we will.
The original contract or something. Thank you. Ms. Burke will have that information at the record.
Yes.
Okay, if everybody please vote accordingly. Mr. Larson, we're doing the consent agenda. We have one more to do, which we'll get to in just a second. Which is the last one, which is C21.
Item C21, resolution accepting a North Carolina drinking water state revolving fund loan for the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant Modernization Project.
Ms. Saunders, do you want to comment on this one since we're just refinancing? Would you be the, or Mr. DeCain?
I'll give it a shot, sir.
Okay, go ahead. Just tell us real quick.
Good afternoon again. This item is for an additional $20 million from the state's Safe Drinking Water Revolving Fund. These are essentially federal funds that are administered by the state for improvements to the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant. The cost of that project is approximately $60 million. These loans are traditionally very low interest. In fact, they're better than issuing bonds if we can get them. They only issue these funds in $20 million increments, so the city council approved applying for and accepting the initial $20 million. This is an additional $20 million towards that project, which will be bid in January.
Okay. Ms. Adams had some comments.
Yes, Mr. DeCain, could you just kind of highlight what some of those improvements and modernizations will be to the water treatment plant? Particularly now, since a lot of people are always concerned about the quality of the water that, is front and center.
Yes, ma'am, I'd be happy to. First of all, you should know that your utility is an award-winning utility on both the water treatment and wastewater treatment side. The improvements at Nielsen are several-fold, but essentially what it does is it takes a plant that was built in three different sort of plants. It started in one phase, and it's been added on to continuously. And what this does is it brings the entire plant up to one single standard with one manufacturer of all the pumps. All the processes will be realigned. All of the electronics and the monitoring that we currently use will be upgraded to current standards. There's an entire laundry list of improvements. But essentially what it does is it takes a plant that's been built over a 20-year period in three different phases and turns it into one complete facility with improved, efficient processes and makes it as green as possible.
Is there any way that we're going to communicate this to the citizens vis-a-vis 13 or the water bill, but preferably the ads that we do in the regular newspapers around here? If we could do a, kind of let them know what's going on with that, because I think that citizens need to know that, again, the amount of money that we're issuing to get those updates done and trying to stay ahead of a crisis in America when it comes to water treatment plants and the infrastructure of those plants.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And in fact, today the Utility Commission passed a resolution recognizing October 23rd as a day without water. And on that day, we will be giving tours, free of charge, of course, at our R.W. Nielsen water treatment plant. And there will be a public announcements about that. But yes, ma'am, to follow up to your original question, absolutely.
Thank you. Ms. McIntosh?
The debt service on this will be paid through the utility bill we receive on a bi-monthly basis.
Ultimately, all the debt service is paid through the revenue.
Right, so this does not come out of general fund?
It does not come out of general fund. It comes out of the water
fund
and sewer fund.
for
Yes, sir.
utilities. Great, thank you.
Correct.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve, what are we on?
21.
It's 21. C-21. Everybody please vote when it comes up. And that is approved. Thank y'all. That is, Mr. Taylor, do you have a question?
If I can, Mr. Chair, make a comment about the consent agenda.
Go right ahead.
I had some citizens who will be tuning in of particular interest of 3 items that we just approved.
Yeah.
Item C11, C22, and 23. Item C11 was a contract approval for the new playground at Sprague Street Recreation Center. That was approved, and then $50,000 for the design and construction of the Reynolds Park Rec Gym, and then another $228,000 for the construction, oversight, and design services for the new $3 million Bellevue facility that we'll be putting there. So I know citizens were interested. We didn't have a whole lot of comments, but those items were approved, and we'll move to Monday's meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Hang on a minute.
You left me.
I just left the meeting. Okay.
Come on back. We'll wait on you.
Come on.
Elvis has
Hang
left
on
the
a minute.
building.
We will now go to the general agenda. We have 7 items. One has been remanded or kept in committee. We will start with G1. If the secretary please read that.
Item G1, resolution authorizing the sale of certain surplus city-owned property in the area of New Hope Lane and East 21st Street pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160A-274 located in the Northeast Ward.
Mr. Borman, would you give us about a 2-minute on this one, because this is a new topic?
Yes, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Chairman Clark, members of the council. On July 19th, 1999, the City Council adopted a development plan for an area to be known as Northeast Winston No. 2. Properties were acquired, they were replatted, and infrastructure on 2 streets was placed. On April 18th, 2005, the City Council adopted a resolution designating the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem and its affiliates as the preferred developer of this Northeast Winston No. 2 redevelopment project. Hawes placed offers on 24 lots, and a 5% bid deposit of $5,800 total was paid. In the 14 years since approval was granted, Hawes has not proceeded with the development of the residential lots. The Board of Education has now come to the city and made an offer to purchase 16 of these lots, which are currently still under option to Hawes, along with 2 additional lots for a total of 18 lots. And if you look on the map here, here you see East 21st Streets. The lots that Hawes still has an option on and is still part of the redevelopment project are the 9 lots north of 21st Street. The lots that the Board of Education is proposing to purchase are those south of East 21st Street. The purchase price would be the current appraised value of $207,076. The appraised value does include the infrastructure development cost of the lots. So if you look at Exhibit A, when you see the appraised values of the lots, the infrastructure cost was apportioned among those lots, so each of them includes a portion of the infrastructure cost. So when we have an appraised value there, that's the cost of the lot along with the proportionate cost of the infrastructure, streets and sidewalks and so forth. The purchase of the 18 lots by the Board of Education will require that the previous authorization of the sale of the 24 lots to Halls in 2005 be rescinded and that agreement voided. The City Council does have the option of whether they want to refund Halls's deposit of $5,800. The resolution is written to refund that deposit, but it's up to the City Council if they would like to do that or not. I can answer any questions that you have, and there are others here who can also answer questions which you may have.
Ms. Burke, this is in your ward. I'll let you take the
All right.
first stab at it.
Thank you very much. This has been a deep concern. I want you to know in the spring of 2019, I canceled a meeting with the school board members because I felt we should have more research on this project. I'm pleased to see and to know there's been some interest by some of the citizens in the area. If you are here today and if you are a parent, would you just raise your hand?
What's the question?
Concerning the property that was just addressed a few minutes ago. And I asked a simple question. If you are a parent with a child at Ashley School, raise your hand. If you are a teacher or a principal at Ashley School, raise your hand. If you are an interested citizen, raise your hand.
Interested and involved.
Madam, tell us stop talking out like that.
Okay.
Yes. It is always good to have citizens' participation. There's been a lot of discussion about this particular matter. And what we have looked at early on, we would hope that neighborhood, choice neighborhood would have been accepted. Twice, we have now failed. The third go-round, if I'm not correct, city manager or the mayor, correct me, when the mayor met with some more folks about choice neighborhood, our city staff became a part of helping to move that forward. Is that correct? All right. And in having the meeting, the school board members, as well as the superintendent, they were invited. However, at the first meeting for the consultants who came in here, they did not show up. The people who came worked very hard with the citizens, and the citizens did participate. They came out. And there were some things as part of what was going on. Some of the citizens felt that they were unsafe in their neighborhood. In fact, I want you to know that the crime is high in the area. We received a total of 1,444 calls for service in the Cleveland Avenue homes September the 18th through to September the 17th. So they sort of got that turned around a little bit. There was disturbances throughout, 174 calls, 12% of the total. Assaults, there was 144, or 98% of the total. Trespassing, 120, or 8.3 of the total. There were 1,292 arrests in Cleveland Avenue homes. Arrests included both citations and physical arrests. There were also traffic-related, 709 arrests. Service for outstanding orders for arrests, 134. Second-degree trespassing, 84 arrests, or 65% of the total. Now, our Winston-Salem police is up there every day. I had said to the person who is the acting that you need to get more security in the area. Because when we're up there, starting at the AM, on the corner of 16th and Liberty, the individual sits daily, AM, on their little carts or either on the ground. And then on 17th Street between Liberty and Cleveland, you have people who are there. The visitors act more like they're the residents, and the residents who live there are afraid. Now, I don't want to sound like the President of the United States, the kinds of things he says, but I want to tell you, I'm sure that the residents, some of them are being abused and are afraid to tell how they are being abused because the people act as if though they own it. Our police are up there around the clock. When they leave, they start doing all over again, and the elderly ones up there are really afraid to come out. And if you watch them, you can tell they're being abused. All right, so we have failed as far as getting HUD to supplement and change the area. I want you to know what we have spent to see that we have not neglected the area. We have spent for Liberty Street improvements, investment. We have spent $3 million in Liberty Street improvements, $336,500 on their program to improve business structure, $503,000 to buy land, $106,000 for CDC operations, and $24,000 in neighborhood revitalization money. Overall investment of your tax dollars, we have spent $6 million within the current CNI boundary. $13 million broader neighborhood areas. Now, the people who have been asking and wanting that property, in the spring I pulled back because I wanted you to actually see, as these council people and the mayor, have you been up there lately to see how it is? Have you looked at the area? Now, as I told some of the residents, and I wanted them to understand this, I do represent Cleveland public housing, but the relationship of how it is managed, there is a executive director. That executive director does not report to us local officials. The mayor is over the executive directors, and he's been in communication with him about it. The mayor and I have discussed this matter more than one time. An executive director must be strong. There was an educational program we started some years ago. At that time, Mr. Clark was on that committee. It was an education committee. It was trying to see what we could do to get students involved. There are not too many people who are in the public housing who's finished high school. Now, at one time, they were the citizens that we went to because they went to school, they came out into the world, and they did wonderful things. When we looked at the education committee, we started a scholarship over there, and it was known as the football player, Agnew, for students going to school 4 years. We also had the non-traditional scholarship for people like their parents who went to the community colleges. And we had a success story. But someone decided that they were going to change that success story. We had a person that was hired who was paid. The money was with the Winston-Salem Foundation. And we were encouraging. You were on the board, I believe, at that particular time, Councilwoman. And we were encouraging the importance of college education. And we have a good story to tell. But as the mayor can tell you, that disappeared. And the director who's over housing, maybe that was not one of his projects. Right today, if we were to try to go and get someone, as a lady told me on Saturday, her granddaughter is an 11th grade teacher. And she said to her grandmother, it is hard to teach children when they cannot read hardly on the 3rd grade level. Now, it is a shame that we have a public housing that's not as interested in the welfare of the people that they go and they're paid for to take care and look after. We have not had anything this bad with our public housing when we thought it was bad. So I said, and I prayed about this, and I talked with the city manager, and I said, you need to come up with a plan. And would you just share that plan, city manager?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, members of the Finance Committee. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What we've discussed is if we do not receive the Choice Neighborhood Grant, the $30 million grant, that we would try to work on the first phase of what that grant proposal entails. The first phase of that proposal would be to work with the Housing Authority on the site where Brown Elementary School used to be, to build some housing that then we could start the phases of the Cleveland Avenue redevelopment. But that would be the first phase that's in the grant proposal anyway. So if we don't get the grant, now I'm hopeful this year we'll get the grant, but if we don't get the grant, we would try to work with the Housing Authority using some bond money as well as private leverage money to at least start on the phase. I think the only way to change that neighborhood is it's going to take some redevelopment.
Yes, and I would hope that when it is introduced or presented, that this council will be willing to move forward. And I would hope that as the mayor and I continue our communication about the dissatisfaction both of us have, we both have spoken about not being pleased, that we know it will have to be a change there. We can no longer allow our citizens to live daily in the kind of condition that they're living in. And so we will be working for some kind of change.
Yes.
Now, I'm praying and hoping when I received about 20 emails and I looked at them and I said again, wonder how many of these are parents, how many of these are interested citizens, really interested in the children, in their welfare, and interested in working with the parents and the school. If I've agreed to vote that we would sell the piece of property to the school system. Did I ask if anybody from the school board here?
We have a school representative.
Oh, school representative, Mr. Walker, but nobody, the superintendent or school board member, not one of them are present.
No, ma'am.
All right, do you know why? Were they informed?
Well,
You give your name and address, please.
Yeah, Darrell Walker, 475 Corporate Square Drive, Assistant Superintendent for Operations for the school system. Good afternoon, Mr. Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, and the Finance Committee Mayor. I can answer your questions. I can kind of tell you what our thoughts are around this piece of property. We have had, obviously, a lot of discussion in the last couple of years about potential to relocate Ashley Elementary. In doing so, we evaluated several different parcels within that residential zone. After some discussion and coming to the table during this grant process a couple of years ago, we realized it could be a pretty powerful partnership as we continue to move forward. We have had a lot of discussion around things other than just a school there. We have had discussions around a daycare, medical clinic, dental clinic to serve the community as well as our children at Ashley. So we've looked at this as a kind of an economic opportunity to be a big part of our redevelopment on one end. So we have Ashley on one end, and you would have the Career Center, Carter and Kennedy on the other, two educational components to better serve that community. And we also have some discussions around how we can utilize our schools, and Mr. Taylor and I had a little bit of this conversation today as well, as community centers and resource centers, maybe even to invite families in after hours to teach them how to cook food and how to prepare meals and do things with fresh vegetables that a lot of folks, I kind of grew up on a farm where you can your food, and we ate food all winter long out of the garden, and people don't know how to necessarily do that today. And with the resources that are in this community, we felt like it's an opportunity for us to be a partner. And so our intent is to really be a partner in that community around this project. Councilman Burke, and I'll entertain any questions outside of that you may have.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions because some years ago we started talking about this project, but the neighborhood was much better than it is today. It was much better. And I did not want any of the citizens in this community to feel that the city of Winston-Salem was in the school business. We're not in the school business. This is not, but we do have land that the school wants to buy. And I would hope if this passes to move forward with them getting the piece of property, that we would not be like when so many of you pushed for Atkins to be a school. And then when it was time for the children to go to school, the black children, there ended up more white children, and sometimes, and now people are mad about that. You need to be mad with yourselves. You had all the opportunity for your children to go to Atkins School. Now they have a strong rules, and it's hard for them to get in there. I'm very pleased that I had someone to finish there, and was president of the student body. Children have to work hard and want to do, and they can. Then, so we need not, with Paisley, the same thing. Paisley had the opportunity for the children to attend the school, but they didn't. And then the superintendent told the principal, you better get busy and get some black children in this school. So to the groups here, those of you who are interested in this school or the activity that Mr. Walker mentioned, if you're here interested in Ashley School, please raise your hand. Well, we would hope that you will be the drum major.
And we will.
Wait now. Wait, the chairman's going to stop you.
Okay, please.
If you're going to be the drum majors, and you're going to carry that torch, and you're going to work with the parents and the teachers and do what needs to be done, but not just after we vote on it and when Mr. Walker and them start doing the project, that they won't see you can't be found. So to be pledged to do that, and I want you to know that Ms. Newman has some information that she's going to give you, some of the same information I read. Do you have some of that? And when you look at that, I hope you'll be committed, hope you will be dedicated, because little black boys and girls should not be walking the street lost and not able to read any more than third grade level.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. The mayor had a comment, then Ms. Adams.
I want to thank Ms. Burke for bringing up the choice neighborhood. We have tried for it twice and been unsuccessful. I feel good about this one. The key to successful grant application is the match that goes along with it. We put some dollars in, obviously, but I thank the school system for your interest in this site. It will add, $20 million to build this or so.
Right now, we're looking at probably, depending on the size of the school, we're probably looking at close to about 28 to 30 million before it's all said and done.
Let's go with 30 then. So the more we put in there, the better our match looks. So I think this is a great site. I think Councilmember Burke did a great job of getting the community input to help form this, and I hope we can move forward with this today.
Mr. McIntosh? She's Burton.
Okay, all right. One, I've got a question for Mr. Bjorling. Is he still up there?
Burling?
How was the option structured? This land's been under option for 14 years?
Yes.
Has it had to come back to us for a renewal, or was it just, and there was no outside time limit on the option?
No.
So isn't it true that that's not an enforceable contract if you don't have an end date on it?
Well, I think it's up to the council to take position on it.
That's just a technical question.
I'll
Okay.
answer that question. There are some legal issues with the option that was conveyed in 1999.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was just about how this impacts the choice neighborhood thing, so I think we're going to talk about that further.
It's my understanding that the Housing Authority is in favor of this project, so they don't mind us counseling the option. All right. Ms. Burke, would you like to make a motion?
Oh, yes. Mayor, members of the council, I move that this surplus city-owned property in the area of New Hope Lane and East 21st Street pursuant to NCGS 16A-274 Northeast Ward be sold to the schools, the Winston-Salem school system.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If the committee members would please vote when it comes up. And I would just like to add my 2 cents as chairman. I think this council is committed to doing what we need to do in this part of town. We're back a third time. Hopefully third is the charm to get the large grant. But I think in the meantime, we have a potentially $30 million project, which will be, I think, very transformative for this neighborhood. And Ms. Burke, I thank you again for your work in stewarding this through. And if you're here, this will go to the full council on Monday night, this coming Monday night, and that meeting starts at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much. That is approved. We will now go to G2.
Item G2, resolution authorizing the allocation of revitalizing urban commercial area RUPA funds for a project in the Waughtown-Thomasville area located in the southeast ward.
Mr. Raleigh, can you introduce this for us?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the committee and council.
Good afternoon.
This item is a request for use of RUCA funds for the property located at 620 Monmouth Street, owned by Miss Annie Tichy. The project entails the renovation of an 1,800 square foot building that was previously used to house a hair salon. The renovation will turn that property into office space. The anticipated cost of the project was $208,000. That includes some contingency. The project was competitively bid. In terms of the financing structure for this particular project, that assistance would be split evenly between low-interest loan and RUCA matching loan funds. So that's $104,000 each. And the funding source will be previously allocated monies to projects in the first and second phases of RUCA that never moved forward. I will point out that Ms. Tichy and her son, Mr. Bobby Tichy, are here to answer any questions that you all have about the specifics of the project.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor, this is in your ward. Would you like to comment?
Just a quick comment. Thank you for bringing this forward. This is actually a good adaptive reuse of a former salon. I think it's a good use of RUCA money. I've been in communication with the teachers. They're doing a good job. That area, I see that some people have it up on their screens. It is developing slowly, but it is just creeping forward. And if you look at this particular area, 15 years ago, you almost won't recognize it. There have been a lot of good development partnerships with a lot of folks in the community, including the teachers, and we're looking forward to supporting the requests.
Mr. McIntosh, you have a comment?
I always like to ask this about our RUCA projects. First of all, what position will we be in from a debtor standpoint? Will we be in first or second position on this? This will attach to the real estate?
It will. I do not know if there's a loan ahead of us. Typically, though, if there is a lien holder that's in first position, we're in a subordinate position. I don't know in this particular case. I can get that information.
If I can get that by Monday, that'd be great. And the second question is, this funding will go towards capital improvements to the property, not to operating or business loans.
Councilmember McIntosh, that is correct. It is exclusively for construction.
Great. Thank you very much.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, Mr. Garrity, what I need, and Mr. Raleigh, is council needs an update of RUCA funds on a regular basis, because we get it coming to us in pieces, even though we have all of the amendments, addendums, and attachments. But I've asked for this a couple of times. When we do these projects, we need to be aware of the drawdown of the money, where it's going, and we need a matrix, and we need some before and after shots of once we designate this money to these projects. Today is October 14th, 2019. So I hope that we get to see this before the year is over with. Thank you.
Ms. Burke.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the councilwoman. Also, I want to say that you are doing a good job over there. You're correct.
Thank
you. It did look very forsaken, but now it's livelier. People investing in businesses. It's a turnaround, and that helps the whole city when we have neighborhoods improving like that.
I do have a few questions for the staff. I would like to know if this is possible to get an Mr. Borland, could you get an appraisal on this building after the renovation now? Not after it's renovated, but what this building would be appraised at if it was fixed up?
As improved.
As improved, yeah.
But that's part of the metrics, Chair.
I've not been requested to do that, but we can if you like.
Yeah. Well, is that something that takes a while?
It would take several weeks.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can we get a market analysis versus a
Yeah,
full-blown
yeah.
appraisal?
A market analysis, could we get that? And I had tied to that, what would office space rent for in this area?
And Chairman Clark,
Yeah.
that's part of that update that we get, a metrics that has that in there, like what the properties are, the money, market rent, what are we at now, what was it before, what is it now? I think we need that.
That's for everything.
Yeah, but I think we need that.
But I would like to see it on this. And Mr. Taylor, this is your ward. You get X amount of RUCA money. It's up to you. I just question whether or not you're getting your money's worth here. You're spending $114 per square foot.
Oh, in terms of that, I see your point of view,
Yeah.
but I think the larger overarching view, we're certainly getting our money's worth because there's a lot of properties that have adaptive reuses, and I got to drive you out there personally. We'll go take a look at it.
But the point is, and Ms. Adams is hit on the head. There's only so much money, and this is going to pull it down even more. And when we get to zero, then we're out of money.
Well, you certainly won't like the next item on the agenda. I think this is a small amount of money. The next item is going to be way more Herculean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get there. Anyway, any other comments on 620 Mama? Can I get a motion on this one, please? Then?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion, a second on G2. If everybody please vote when this comes up. And that is approved. Thank you very much. We will now go to G3.
Item G3, resolution authorizing the allocation of additional revitalizing urban commercial area RUCA funds for a project in the West Salem area located in the South Ward.
Keep going.
Chairman Clark, this is a request for RUCA assistance from the owners of the West Salem Shopping Center. They are planning to do an additional RUCA project that will total $735,130 to be split evenly between RUCA low interest loan and RUCA matching loan funds. The project, in terms of the scope, entails improvements to the parking lot and internal sidewalk structure, as well as a significant part of that money being dedicated to tenant improvements for a retail location, prospectively for the Harvest Market, a grocery store co-op. It is, again, located in the West Salem RUCA area. The project has been competitively bid. As I mentioned, this is a second round of RUCA funding. West Salem was included in the second RUCA 2 projects. The scope of that project included some facade improvements, roof replacement work, HVAC replacement. So this is an additional kind of second round of property improvements that the property owners are intending to do with these particular funds. The owner, Mr. Hubbard of Hubbard Realty, is here, as well as the representatives from the Harvest Market are also here if you have any particular questions about the project.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor, I'll give you.
This is in Mr. Larson's ward.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But if you want me to speak, I'll be happy to.
No, this is at,
You were so eloquent before.
this is at Peters Creek and Academy. Right. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Larson, excuse me.
Thank you. Yes, I'm right across from Dan Bessie, actually. This is a transformative location. It's the corner of Academy Street and Peters Creek Parkway. We did a major study on Peters Creek Parkway, which was brought to this commission last spring. Been a long study of how to deal with this corridor, this commercial corridor. It's right across the street from the Budget Inn, which has recently been acquired, and there's aspirational plans for demolishing that and building something significant in housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, as well as retail. This is really an anchor moving southward from the ballpark in our efforts to basically clean up a corridor. And some money has been spent before, but a great deal more needs to be done. When I first came to Winston-Salem in 1976, this was a thriving shopping center. And since that time, it has gradually deteriorated, mostly through maintenance issues. I feel confident that this anchor will revitalize not only across the street, but up and down the corridor as well, and I'm fully supportive.
Any comments or questions? Mr. McIntosh?
I'm going to ask my same questions I just did. What's our, from a financing debt position, where do we line up in the capital stack?
Councilman McIntosh, I'll have to get that information for you, but we can find out.
And then my second question is, are all the improvements being done to the real estate, which is related to our risk level, and are they considered capital improvements, or are they considered business improvements?
These are exclusively capital improvements.
Okay, even the $330,000 for what looks to be fairly specific harvest market.
Correct. And those costs, Councilman McIntosh, are devoted to the upfit, exclusively to costs associated with the upfit of the space, frankly, for any tenant. It's just upfit to a tenant space. The harvest market, frankly, may or may not occupy that space.
Okay.
So those improvements are irrespective of the tenant.
Okay, it's not contingent on them moving into that.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Adams?
Yes, again, I'm going back, rewinding the tape. We're voting on all of these things that come to us and putting it on the agenda, Mr. Raleigh. But I've been asking for this update for council at least every time we come forward with a RUCA project. The council needs to be able to see on one page a matrix that tells me where we are with the money. Like we're voting on projects and we don't even have a clue. I know you mentioned how much is in it, but there should be an attachment to these asks or resolutions that tell us where we are each project. Because if you got a council member that somebody comes to us with a project, I know we can try to figure out where to find the money, but it would be best for all of us, again, in order to make these decisions, we have all of the information that we need to have. Again, I have nothing against the project. I just have an issue with the fact that we don't get all of the necessary information in order to make the decision for whatever it is that we're doing. And, I don't know. Where are we now? If we vote on this, where are we now with the balance of the RUCA funds for this round?
Mr. Larson?
I think that's a very valid point. My understanding is that some of this money is from surpluses of Phase 1 and 2, so we haven't totally spent out earlier funding. Is that
Councilman Larson, that is.
And I think it would be useful to get an accounting of Phase 1 and 2 as well as 3 as we're going into it. But well, obviously some of the money is not being spent from the previous allocations that have been made.
Yeah, if I could follow up on that, and Mr. Raleigh, I'm reading out from the staff report, the very last paragraph. It says the source would be funds previously allocated for RUCA project but never moved forward during RUCA phases 2 and 3, and list them out. So I'd like to know what's the total that the city's giving, and are we talking about $735,000 new money in addition to what they got previously but what hasn't been spent?
So, Councilmember Clark, this would be $700,000, $35,000 of new money, meaning it's previously allocated, not for the shopping center. It was previously allocated for other RUCA projects that never moved forward. So essentially, we're taking funds that have already been approved for projects elsewhere that never actually came to fruition, and moving those funds.
Okay, gotcha. But I think, again, it would be nice for Monday night, and I think the same thing you attached to Mr. Taylor's attached to this one, so we'll kind of know where we are, because I would think between these two items, we're about out of RUCA money.
If I may, there were dollars that were previously allocated to the southeastern portion of the city that were not utilized.
Yes.
So these dollars were accounted for. They came to us. We voted on it. We have the information. I have the information on the account.
The project never happened.
The project never happened. So we rerouted those funds to other projects. Now, that doesn't include the last round of bond referendum money. But everybody should know what's going on in the war, because I do.
Okay. All right.
One more question, comment. And Councilmember Taylor, I agree with you. I support what you got going on, all of you. All I'm asking for is the information. Once we find out a project, and you've heard us talk about this 5, 6, 7 years ago, when a project is no longer a viable project, when we had the previous community development people, we asked that they need to let us know. So at that point then, people or projects in our wards, we could collaboratively, with doing our council community meetings, we can announce that. There is X amount of funding left, that this project didn't get done, and it's now available. So you all need to go get your projects, come forward, talk to the city.
Completely.
I never know from day to day, and I know that you're very on it, Mr. Larson's on it, but I don't know unless there's somebody give me this information, because we see so much. But this is one of those important things that we help to collaborate on and create, and I just like to have an opportunity. That's what you always used to tell me.
Point taken.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, Ms. Burke.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Larson about what he wants to do with that area over there. And when we look at the ballpark, we look at all the new apartments, we see how many people are coming and going down Peters Creek Parkway. That is an eyesore. So to make it look better, it will attract more folks. And by the way, this city, last week it was recognized as the 7th city where people like to retire and come and live and have places to stay that are decent and still affordable.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Mr. McIntosh.
This does tie in with the Budget In project across the street. The matrix that they get judged on for low-income housing financing. A large component of that is closeness to a food store. So if that is in this mix, that will it'll be greatly helpful to them the next round of funding that comes out.
Okay. And by the way, it would be nice when you include other information to give us an update on the hotel project, or
Under demolition.
the project to demolish the hotel.
I'm just going to say this quickly. Had the number of years that Councilwoman Adams asked for this, then we wouldn't have had that long discussion, City Manager.
Okay, can I get a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, when it comes up, everybody please vote. Okay. That is approved. Thank you very much. We will now go to G4.
Item G4, information on resolution authorizing the allocation of commercial redevelopment of blighted areas, 2018 bond money for a project in the College Village area located in the West Ward.
Mr. Evans, keep going.
Certainly.
Mr. Raleigh, excuse me.
I answer to anything, Councilmember Clark. It's quite all right. Councilmember Clark Committee, this is a request from College Village Holdings LLC, which is the owner of 753 Avalon Road, for financial assistance to assist with site improvements that include parking lot paving, driveway aprons, and sidewalks, and some exterior lighting. College Village was one of the RUCA areas that was originally identified in the report that was produced in 2005. Yeah. If you'll recall, College Village was one of 6 RUCA areas that was specifically excluded when we began funding the 3rd phase of RUCA. So because the project is not eligible for RUCA consideration, we're bringing this item and suggesting that a council has a desire to move forward with this project, that those funds come from the 2018 bond monies from the commercial redevelopment of blighted areas money, again, that was approved as part of the 2018 bond funds. This would represent the first project that would make use of those funds. The project is estimated to cost $152,000, as opposed to your more traditional structure of financing. This particular assistance, the owner has agreed for that to be entirely a low-interest loan, and as opposed to the standard 10-year payback period that you'll find with the RUCA projects, the property owner has committed to repayment over a 2-year period for this particular project. So again, that basically means that there is none of the money, none of the assistance that would go to this project is deferred or forgivable. And Mr. Dewey Anderson, who is the principal with College Village Holdings, LLC, is here to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions? I will say it is very, very rare that we get something like this from the West Ward. Right in the West Ward, it's an old grocery store pharmacy is what it is. And I think this loan will be very safe and paid back very quickly.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I've always said when your ward wants more leaves, I told the city manager, pick them up. Pick up as many leaves as the West Ward wants because they ask very little.
We
And of course, I think this is a project, and they do carry a large tax base. They do. So I don't think this is a major something. We ought to be happy to do it.
Okay, can I get a motion on this? Oh,
Just want to throw in that if you haven't been over to the project lately, it really has turned around. The developer's done a really good job on it. The Bowie's Market there is going great guns, so I think it's an excellent project.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval for that.
Can we get a second?
Second.
Comment.
Thank you. All righty. You can't vote. Oh, excuse me.
No, it's quite all right. I know this is in the West Ward, but my math is a little hazy, so if you can give me a report on how much money is left after this project is spent. I just like to hold all projects to the same standard. We just had a long conversation about the other two projects in the other two wards, but when we get to the West Ward, I'm not saying anything, but we just approve it willy-nilly.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, let's just talk through it all.
They asked for nothing much.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, I believe. Oh, this is just information item?
Oh,
Excuse
it's
me.
the information, right?
Y'all don't get to vote. This is just information item.
Yeah.
All right, excuse me. G4. G5's been remanded into the committee. G6.
Item G6, information regarding request from Piedmont Land Conservatory.
Conservatory.
Conservancy.
Conservancy.
To assist in acquiring conservation easement on land across from the school. Located in the north.
And this also is for information only. Ralston, could you start this off? And I know you got the gentleman here from the Conservancy as well.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joins, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the Finance Committee.
Good afternoon.
The Piedmont Land Conservancy is partnering with the Cross North School to conserve 92 acres of land for the children of the Cross North School and Children's Home in the Winston-Salem community. The PLC's, this is part of the PLC's Piece of Land campaign. Their goal is to raise $7.9 million. Here with me today is Kevin Redding, the Executive Director for the Piedmont Land Conservancy, and he has a brief presentation that he would like to go through that could further explain this process and their goals.
Mr. Reddy, you have the floor.
He just needs to get to the desktop because he has a presentation that's on flash.
That's it right there.
I don't remember
the
children
mountain's
looking like
bigger than we thought. That's Reynolds Auditorium on top.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon.
Again, my name's Kevin Redding. I'm the Director of Piedmont Land Conservancy. And we've got a few slides just to give you a better visual impression of what we're talking about. But we, the Land Conservancy, we're 29 years old. We are based in Greensboro, but we are actually property owners and taxpayers in the city of Winston-Salem. We own a property at 1466 Old Town Road, the Emily Allen Wildflower Preserve that the Conservancy owns. And we have been working with the Cross North School for a number of years, even predating their merger with what was formerly known as the Children's Home of Winston-Salem. And our effort is to conserve what we consider to be the most iconic property, undeveloped property in the city of Winston-Salem. We have a short window to do that. We have an agreement in place with the Cross North School where we would purchase a conservation easement. If you've never heard of an easement before, you're not alone. A conservation easement is a legal document that specifies what can and cannot happen on a property in the future. A lot of times we work on conservation easements on farms in Rockingham County or Stokes County or Randolph County. In this case, it's in downtown Winston-Salem, and the opportunity is to protect a piece of property. Yeah, it's right there. That Charlotte cannot rival, that Greensboro has no rival for, and would really keep Winston-Salem's iconic piece of property undeveloped and allow public access to it in the form of a walking trail on the property. We would build 2 new access points, one on the east, one on the west, that would allow for public access and allow people to access this really, really great piece of property.
Right here.
Thank you.
There you go.
So that was my presentation. If you still want to see it.
Very good.
We are in the
the final phase. We have until the end of the year to have $6.5 million committed to the capital campaign. To date, we have $4.2 million raised. 4.1 of that is private, from private individuals, corporations, and foundations. We envision that the total campaign beyond the 6.5 is $7.9 million. We anticipate at least $7 million of that will be private funds. So at least 90% of the funds raised towards this will come from the private community, local foundations, and local corporations. Here's a map. So the farm that you're looking at here, this is the campus of the Children's Home, and all the road runs here. Harbor Acres here, the Boston-Thurman neighborhood, Paisley, and the business district. The conservation easement would entail everything that has been in pasture land for many years, and the strip along Reynolda Road at the front. It totals about 92 acres, and the trail there is conceptual, but our vision is to have a trail probably that will go along the creek and have 1.5 to 2 miles of trail that will connect the Haynes Park area through this property over to the Paisley School area. The finances break down in this manner, and these are all tentative. They're not official, but $6.5 million to purchase conservation easement. We have had 2 appraisals completed. This is those numbers are supported by the appraisals that we had commissioned, and for us, we think it's a triple win opportunity. It's a win for PLC to protect a piece of property that there is no other like in Winston-Salem. It's great for the Krosnor School. They're going to take this money, put it directly back into the care of the children on their grounds and the programming that they are completing. And it's a win for local residents who will get access to this property, and the assurance, everyone's fear in Winston-Salem is what's going to happen to that property. So everybody will get a sigh of relief knowing that that land will be protected, and we'll have that for future generations as well. Just a short list of the individuals who are on our campaign, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'm equally happy to take anyone that would like to go on a tour of the property. It's a beautiful time of year to get out and see it, but I also understand you're busy folks. So, any questions?
Questions? Mr. Larson?
Is that little strip that goes right along Reynolda Road, which is fairly narrow, and go back to your map, is that retention for that specifically for the walkway to connect over to Haynes Park, or what is it?
Yes, the trail will run along that strip.
Just to make sure that pathway is available? Correct. To make that connection?
Correct. We did hear at the Recreation and Parks Commission there are concerns about the bike path on Reynolda there. This project, I don't think will directly deal with that, but we are more than happy to work with DOT or whoever the appropriate entity is to see what options may be available there to make it a safer intersection.
Mr. McIntosh.
Should we come to some agreement, some form of financial aid to you guys, think there's any possibility we could board a couple of horses for our police department there?
For the police department? We are open to all kinds of ideas at this point.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. For the staff, the closest parallel to this is when we bought Longleaf Golf Course, or Long Creek. If you could get me some information on what we paid for that total and per acre, and I thought there was a conservation easement on some of that land. So if you could just give me some information on that, I would appreciate it for everybody. Ms. Scipio.
Is it too early to ask what are they considering our involvement would be in this project?
You may certainly ask. She has asked what would you like for us to get involved in?
At this point, we believe that we have a gap of roughly $1 million to raise by the end of the year. We're not asking for every penny of that to come from the city, but the larger amount of that as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I would suggest, I know the area well, it technically in Ms. Adams, but it literally touches right across the street from Mr. McIntosh's, so that's what it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The last one is G7.
Item G7, information regarding new qualified management agreement for the Benton Convention Center located in the North Ward.
Mr. Mr. Rowell, when you give your presentation, be sure to give us a little history of, because we've had an agreement for a number of years here between the hotels and all that, so we'll have a reference point.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, and members of the City Council.
Good afternoon.
So in February 2004, the city entered into a memorandum of understanding with a Noble Investment Group to redevelop the Adams Mark Hotel in Benton into what is now the Twin City Quarter. As part of that agreement, Noble Investment Group repositioned the Adams Mark Hotel into two hotels, the Marriott and an Embassy Suites. And then the city contracted with Noble Investment Group to manage the Benton. As part of that MOU, the city purchased the 38,000 square feet in the bottom of the Embassy Suites that includes the Grand Pavilion and then also conference center space. The Noble Investment Group leased that space from the city. The lease payment was sufficient to cover the debt on that investment. Then in June of 2006, Noble Investment Group sold the hotels to Hospitality Ventures Management Group. And as part of that sale, they assumed the management agreement to operate the Benton for the city. And then a little over a year later, Hospitality Ventures Management Group sold the Embassy Suites to S.H. Winston Cherry LLC, which is a Florida LLC owned by Premier Management, and assigned the lease of the city-owned space in the Embassy Suites, the Grand Pavilion, and the conference center space to PM Meeting Venue. So they are currently the leasee of that space in the bottom of the Embassy and are responsible for paying the $600,000 annual lease payment. So what we have now, we have two owners of the hotel properties rather than one, as we had back in 2004. And HVMG is our current operator of the Benton. So that kind of comprises where we are with the Twin City Quarter. So the original management agreement expired on June 30th of this year, and the city has been working with HVMG on a month-to-month basis to operate the Benton as we start to negotiate a new qualified management agreement. Now, going back to the early years of the original agreement, it was recognized early that there were certain aspects of the original management agreement that financially was not working for the properties in terms of the allocation of expenses. And so at that time, there was basically a handshake agreement to basically include all three of the properties in the allocation. The original agreement didn't contemplate having both of the hotels and the Benton as part of the allocation of expenses, and so that helped make the whole project work. And so there were some other kind of housekeeping items that were adjusted in terms of deadlines for submitting the annual budget proposal for the Benton. So the information item that is before you today presents a framework for a potential new qualified management agreement with HVMG. And so just to highlight some of those provisions, number one, it would formalize the amendments that we had discussed and had really put into place in practice over the years in terms of the allocation of expenses, in terms of when the budget proposals are due, how the management fees calculated. But in addition to those provisions, management's also recommending that we increase the requirements for reporting so that we can communicate to council more about the performance of the Benton, both financially and in terms of the activity in the center. Also, for there to be more city input on the selection of the area general manager. Also, to include language that would allow use of space for city events, perhaps at a reduced or no cost in terms of the rent and food and beverage, as long as the space is available. I mean, our number one goal is still for the Benton to be successful financially, and if there is a revenue generating event, then that would probably take priority over a city event. But as part of that, if there is a city event that would be a net cost to the Benton, then that would be recognized kind of below the line and not shown as part of the gross operating profit for the Benton. Also, we recommend including a provision about NWB participation if we were to go out and solicit requests for qualifications and requests for proposals, our NWB policy would be enforced. And so since we are looking at continuing our relationship with Hospitality Ventures Management Group, we want to include language that specifically requires them to meet our 10% goal at least for NWB participation for contracted services. And then finally, we're contemplating some incentives for them to, if they meet certain goals, whether it's revenue generation or attendance or usage days. And so we're still in the process of kind of working through those details. But the information item that is before you today, there did want to provide some performance measures. So you can see that, for example, Benton attendance and Benton events, particularly since the renovation, and the renovation occurred during fiscal years 2016 and 2017, have been higher than they were prior to the renovation. So we do feel like that we're seeing the results of that investment, that $20 million investment. Also, though, I want to highlight the financial performance of the Benton, and that's on the attachment to the information item. This past fiscal year 2018-19, we saw the lowest subsidy that we've seen since going back to 2001, $537,000, which is about a 48% decrease to what the subsidy was in 2018. So based on the activity, the performance in terms of activity, in terms of the financial performance, what management plans to bring back is an action item that would recommend entering into a new 15-year agreement with Hospitality Venture Management Group with the provisions that I've kind of described in general terms today. But our plan is to take a proposal to the Public Assembly Facilities Commission later this month for them to review and then make a recommendation to the council for approval in November. Finally, did want to also provide some information about Hospitality Venture Management Group in terms of the workforce that they employ in the the Twin City Quarter, and that's found on the last page there in terms of some of the demographics information in terms of race and gender. So with that, finally, one other point related to the management agreement, the city is working with HVNG management on looking at the Grand Pavilion and Conference Center space. We recognize that there are some issues with the marketability of that space. It's really, quite honestly, is very tired looking in terms of its condition. And so city management and HVMG management are working on a scope of work to basically refresh that space. And in the coming weeks, we'll be bringing back a proposal for how we might go about doing that work and financing that improvement so that it really can tie in to the Benton and help us really even market larger events that would require both the Benton and the use of that space. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Ms. Adams?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Rao, and all of the staff that worked to get the renovations done. I want to thank my colleagues when we had to keep coming back because we kept finding issues with the convention center. But we know that that was the third rehab of the convention center, and I'm sure years to come we'll see more. I felt very confident, as well as you and others, that us remodeling the building, because we had seen so many other convention centers in North Carolina do that before we got to ours, and we were starting to be affected by their improvements. Everyone that comes to Winston that goes to that Benton, they talk about the colors. See, I told you they'd work. They talk about the carpet. I told them that's because if anybody spill anything, it's not so easy to see. And the whole viability of that area itself. Good job. On your attachment that shows the minority or the hiring demographics, is this only for HVMG, just what I see?
This is for HVMG and their employment throughout the district.
That's the three areas, right? So what about the other OMA? What about them? Do they not have hiring metrics, or do they use the same people? And I want to know whether the numbers are the same. Like if it's 218, is it just 218 for HVMG, or is it 218 for HVMG, the city, and OMA, QMA?
So, Councilmember Adams, the QMA is the qualified management agreement. So we are contracting with HVMG to run the Benton, but they also operate both of the hotels. They staff the hotels, but I will confirm that those numbers are all HVMG. I know that it does not include any contract employees.
And
that they
I'd
may
like
hire.
to see the contract numbers,
Okay.
demographics, if possible. I mean, if they're working in our facilities, we need to see those numbers as well, and you can break those out for that. But other than that, I think we did a good job on this one.
Ms. Burke?
We did do a good job in that downstairs. They really made that nice and we're able to use it, and it's just such a pleasant. And since earth tones are my favorite colors, they assured me that they would be in earth tone colors.
So we did a collaboration there.
But what I want to say, though, all of the good things we've heard, the Embassy Suite does not represent us. When you have people leaving the Marriott, walking across, or stopping going into the Embassy Suite, it is a disgrace. Also, tourism. Our Visit Winston-Salem people are having a difficult job when they try to get people to stay in there. And I've had a meeting with the city manager and Mr. Rao and Ms. Saunders. I have not met with you, but I thought you all were meeting together to see what type of recommendations you could make to make that a better place. Most folks who come to conferences and they spill over into the Embassy Suite, they're disappointed when they leave, but their friends are happy when they leave because they've been in a nice environment and it's pleasant. When the last time have the elected officials visit the Embassy Suite? That's just a question. Your business whenever you think you want to visit it. But we need to know something, Mr. City Manager.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke, as Mr. Rao indicated, we are working with HVMG on a plan to refresh the lower level, which the city actually owns. So the Grand Pavilion and all of that, the ballrooms downstairs, the walkway from the tunnel. Right now, it's in pretty bad shape, and so we're working on a plan with them to get that done, hopefully in short order, coming back to council. As far as the rest of the hotel, Ben could probably answer that better than I could. As you know, they've had a chiller sitting out on the street for a year. Yeah. Ben, they say they're close now to beginning their renovations, correct?
That's correct. I believe it's supposed to start happening towards the end of this calendar year. They have to, in order to kind of continue to have the Embassy Suites flag, they have to make investments, and they're planning to do renovations of the rooms.
But Mr. City Manager, you must let them know we're not going to talk
Yes,
about this.
we will.
They must understand that.
Mr. McIntosh?
I do want to say that what a great investment we made in this building. Councilmember from the ward, Dee, I know was very involved in a lot of the decisions there, and Mayor Pro Tem.
He was with me down there for inspections.
And Mayor Pro Tem sits on the Tourism Development Authority, and I think it's been a real great success story. We put good money in, but we're getting good money back.
Excellent.
Do we have numbers for 2019, 2020 so far? I know we're very early into that fiscal year, but is the trajectory of occupancy tax keeping pace with last year's?
Yes, Councilmember McIntosh, and I can provide that information for you, but I think that based on, the most recent meeting of the Tourism Development Authority Board of Directors, I think occupancy tax revenues are trending still a little bit better than budgeted estimates going into the year.
Sure.
So we're very hopeful about that, and I think so far the Benton's financial performance is kind of tracking right with budget right now.
Okay. I do think that investment in that lower level where we have a lot of big events is well needed and will pay back. It certainly has in the lower level of the Benton. That space was almost unusable before, and now it's a big hit. It's a big hit. And the lower level of the pavilion, you still have the Zamboni entrance on the side. I mean, that building goes back to that level where it used to be a skating rink. And so it's old. It looks old, and I think as long as we find the money, if we have the money in the budget or how we structure this, I think it'll pay us back in dividends. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's for information only. I thank everybody for coming tonight. At 6 o'clock, which is in roughly 10 minutes, the Public Safety Committee will start. Thank you.